welcome back to the people who joined me last month, and hi to all the new people that are starting to myth-bust with me. This is, as Rebecca said, the second of our series of 4 myth-busting seminars, and we are doing them every month, and we will be doing another one next month on the change manager's role. As Rebecca was just saying, quickly, just so you know, best is for you to maximize your screen. As you can see there, we've said it's good for you guys to just click it open because we will be doing some interactive webinar today. So as an interactive webinar, I'm going to be getting you guys to do a lot of the work. If you do have any questions along the way, our lovely hosts, so Rebecca and Manuela for me, will be looking after any questions. Just put it into the chat box, or raise your hand, or put it into Q&A. Any of those are acceptable if you've got questions along the way. As we were just mentioning, this is a series of 4 myth-busting sessions, of which if you have missed the first one and you did want to go back and take a look at it, you will be able to find it on our DDLS YouTube channel. So if you do go to YouTube, put in DDLS, you will be able to find all the webinars that we've done there in the past. And there will be one in particular, which is the myth-busting on the role of the business analyst. We did myth-bust last month, and we did do one on the business analyst role, and it was a great session. So if you did miss that, feel free to go on our YouTube channel to just take a look at it again. So today we're here to do facilitation, and we're going to myth-bust on the role of the facilitator, in particular just the facilitator. And most of you, even though you might not have that job title as a facilitator, you actually do it day to day. And where we come in as being a facilitator is whenever we run workshops or we run meetings. And this day and age, most of us have meetings. It's almost quite hard to find any job role that doesn't have a meeting. And what we want to make sure we do is that I often hear on the ground with people who do go to meetings after meetings after meetings is that they feel as if they can't get that hour of their life back. And most people go, why did I even go to that meeting for? What was that workshop about? Or everybody just jumped up and down loud enough, and then we didn't actually get anywhere. And what we want to look at is the actual problem itself with some of these workshops and some of these meetings. Is the first one we've got here in front of us is that we get a lack of involvement. You usually, sometimes in some meetings or workshops, you might get some people who are snoozing in the background, some people who aren't really engaged, they're on their laptops, they're on their phones, they're doing other things other than where they should be. And at that point, we'll have started to talk a little bit about whether or not they should be there. Perhaps we weren't targeting the right audience. We need to understand why is it that they have a lack of involvement. What is the root cause for that? The next one we've got there is no buy-in. People often come to a meeting and go, but I don't think there's any point to that because that's not what we were thinking. So the lack of buy-in also is a big drive for how we actually facilitate our meetings and our workshops as well. So we will take a look at a lot about buy-in. The next one we do is get to no consensus. And often many meetings I've seen in the past, and I've been in many of those where we come out of it with no agreement, and not even the whole we will agree to disagree. It is just that we walk out with no agreement. And now we're trying to make sure that as a facilitator, someone who's going to facilitate that meeting and that workshop, you're going to get to an outcome. You're going to get to that consensus as a group. It's always about what do you want to achieve as a group? Why are you all there for if you're not going to do it as a group? If you're only going to get one person's opinion and one person's going to make up their mind, then you might as well allow that one person to do it without wasting everybody else's time in a meeting or a workshop. The next one is that you don't get commitment. So in other words, they might not even show up in the first place. You might actually need key stakeholders to be there to make that decision in the meeting or workshop, but they haven't turned up. They're not actually there to actually participate or be able to provide you that outcome. And the last one, there's no accountability. So they're not giving the participants who is in your meeting or your workshop the accountability. They don't know what role they've got to play and how they play it and what they actually need to do to actually get to that outcome. So those are some of the things we're going to look at as to the problem and to keep the problem in mind in the first instance as to why we even need facilitation. So what is facilitation? We might have heard that word a lot of times, and we say, yes, we need to facilitate a meeting, we need to facilitate. And what we say facilitation is, here we say facilitation is a helping role. So you're there to help and guide. And in Latin, it says it is to enable. Okay, so we're trying to make sure that the role that you're going to do is going to be of guidance. You're going to lead them. You're going to help them to make sure that they get to that outcome, they get to that consensus, or what you're trying to achieve out of that meeting. What we say here is that it's about providing that leadership without taking reins. So you're not spoon-feeding the answer to people. That's not what you're about. You're not trying to persuade them to go a certain way. You're not giving them a biased point of view. You're making sure that everyone understands that it is a helping role, that you're trying to guide them to that conclusion, to that outcome as a group. So everybody that's there gets equal say, and you're trying to do it as a group. Often we need to think about green thinking and red thinking. You're going to hear me talk a lot about green and red thinking today. And even when I facilitate workshops, as a actual certified facilitator, I actually have hats, physical hats that I put on during an actual meeting or workshop, where I try to put on my green hat if it's just focusing on the process. So when you're focusing on meeting that outcome, when you're not talking about the content itself, and you're just making sure, do people know how to reach that outcome? Do people know how to vote? Do people know how to get to a clustering? Do people know how to get to brain dumping? Do people know how to get to where they need to get to and get the information that they need versus the actual information itself? People who care about the subject itself, the subject matter experts, the people who care about the content puts on more of the red thinking hat, which the red thinking hat is more about your tasks. So here, as a facilitator, you're often focused on just your green thinking. It's all about the how versus the what, okay? So you want to know, how are you going to get there? How do you get everyone to participate? How do you get to a consensus? How do you achieve that outcome that you're trying to do in your meeting or in your workshop? We are going to make this an interactive session. We are going to go through a number of statements over the next half an hour or so, and these number of statements is all to do with facilitation. And what we're going to do is get you guys, you will get a pop-up on the one that looks like on your left-hand side. You get a little pop-up, and what you do is you will submit your answers once you decide whether it is a myth or whether it's a truth. And if you don't have your full screen and you've chosen to just have it on the side panel, you'll actually get it and you'll have to open it on the side panel. You'll have to go to polling at the top, open that up, and then you'll see the polls come up. Otherwise, it will be hidden from you. So if you haven't maximized your screen, you will have it as a hidden option. So you might want to make sure you can find either of those first. First statement that we're going to look at is, a facilitator does not need to understand the content of that workshop or meeting. So what we're going to do is, I usually put 15 seconds up on the clock, and I will open that poll to you right now. And it is about the fact that if you think a facilitator does not need to understand the content of that workshop or meeting. So a facilitator does not need to understand the content of that workshop or meeting. So I'll wait for your answers to come in. I can see them coming through now. So put in whether you think this is a myth or whether you think this is a truth. Okay, so the answers have all come through. I'm just going to close off that poll. And the comment we were looking at is, a facilitator does not need to understand the content of the workshop or meeting. Okay, so talking about the content of that workshop or meeting, just consolidating your poll answers right now from everybody. We've had 48 responses. Just to show everybody the results, pushing you guys the results, we've got quite a tight, 42% of you have gone with the myth, and 29% of you have gone with the truth, of which some of you have just sat on the fence. So we're going to take a look at what it is. A facilitator does not need to understand the content of that workshop or meeting. This is a truth. This is a truth. You will learn as a facilitator that you can actually be independent of the content. You can come in and you can facilitate a meeting irrespective of what knowledge you have of that subject. So the idea is you're not wearing a red hat. So what we focus on in facilitation is that you focus on a green hat. And the green hat is about the process, the sticky notes, the dots, the post-it notes, how you get everybody to get to a consensus, what your tools and techniques are to get to that outcome. Where we wear a red hat is where we feel we need to have that subject knowledge, okay? And what we often say with a facilitator is, you don't need to actually know that subject knowledge. I've been hired in many times to go and facilitate workshops. I have no clue what that particular finance industry is talking about, what that particular mining industry is talking about, but I can get them to reach an outcome as a group because I do not need to know the content. The people in the group that is participating, they need to understand the subject. Then somebody in that room would be a subject matter expert. Somebody would be what we call a task leader. They will be wearing the red hat. They would understand the content and what exactly they're talking about and all of those details. What we need to do here as a facilitator is ensure that everybody in the group gets an equal say, how they're coming to a consensus, how they're getting to that outcome, what tools and techniques you're going to use in particular. So you're thinking about the process itself. It's the how are you going to facilitate that particular workshop. Facilitators can facilitate workshops up to about 200, 500 people, and they don't always have to know every single ins and out of that content. It's always about the process. How are you going to get 200 to 500 people in a big, large room to all get an equal say, to all participate, to all have that buy-in? So that is the role there of the facilitator. The next one we're going to do, the next statement we're about to do, is facilitators only need to consider the tasks and processes to a workshop or a meeting. So again, I'll open up that poll to you all now, whether you think this is a myth or whether you think it is a truth. Okay. It is facilitators only need to consider the tasks and processes to a workshop or meeting. So facilitators only need to consider the tasks and processes to a workshop or meeting. So whether you guys think this is a myth or whether you guys think this is a truth. Okay. And again, I'll just see the last few that's coming through now before I close off that poll. I can see a few more coming through. One last minute decision, myth or truth of facilitators only need to consider the tasks and processes to a workshop or meeting. So how you do it and the content itself. The tasks, so the content, the processes, the how to a workshop or meeting itself. Poll results have come through and it looks like we have 56% of you have said that this is a myth, with a 23% of you saying that this is a truth, and some of you again on the fence. So our answer here for truth or myth is this is a myth. This is a myth. And what we do look at is the process iceberg. Some of you might have seen this before. As a facilitator, you need to consider all 5 levels of this process iceberg. And with the facilitation iceberg, you will see that line that is above the water. As you know, in iceberg, there is above the waterline and under the waterline. And what goes above the waterline is your objectives and tasks and your processes. So what they're trying to say here is, yes, it's crucial for you to know for sure what you're trying to achieve, which is your objective. You need to know the tasks, what are the activities you're doing, and then you definitely need to know your processes, how you're going to do it and what formats you're going to use. Those are definitely important. And they're saying that is the tippy point of your iceberg. If we go further down, they're saying most meetings and workshops also need to consider the other 3 levels, which is where we usually go wrong. We often neglect those other 3 levels and we kind of forget about them and kind of focus too much on the tasks at hand, the objective that we've got, and we focus too much on this is the one process that we're going to follow to get to end to end. So what we want to look at is the communication. How are you communicating? Is it in person? Are you communicating through pieces of paper? How is your form of communication? How's your interpersonal interactions? Is it in groups? Are you actually getting everywhere to have a say? The next level there is individual preferences and roles. Has a lot to do with things like Myers-Briggs. We look at different personality styles. Sometimes you often ask a certain personality style to make a decision on the spot. And that doesn't happen for everybody because there are some people who can't actually make a decision right then and there because that's not within their personality type. Their personality type states that they need facts, they need data, they need to know the logical thinking before they can make that decision. So you will need to often, for those particular people, supply them the information beforehand or let them digest the information afterwards to make a decision. So if you do know that your particular meeting or workshop requires you to make a decision right then, right there, you need to consider the fact that you've got different personality types. So if that's what you want them to do, set it out on your agenda. Let them know those objectives beforehand. For the people who need to make those decisions, let them be aware that they need to make those decisions and then come back to you and go, hey, to do so, I need to know more, and these are some of the things that I still need to know. So do your legwork as well. There are other people you might find often in your meeting, and you might say to me, Louisa, I've been in many meetings, and there's always this one person that keeps talking, and there's always this one person that never talks. The person that never talks doesn't always mean that they're not engaged. The person that doesn't talk might actually need to think to speak. And then they struggle to do so when they've got someone in the room who actually is talking, not because they want to be outright rude, it's because they actually think. They actually think the way by speaking. Okay, so they've got to speak out loud to be able to think, and those people in a room together with the other type might not always be suited. So we find that you might naturally just say, oh, that person's very outspoken, they're not letting us have an edgeway in this meeting, and that's not at all. What they're trying to say is there are different personality types, and you've got to be able to allow for all personality types to have a say. So if you ask for something like consensus, you definitely want to make sure that everybody's going to have that input. You're not just asking the input of the people who's jumping up and down loud enough. You're asking the input from everybody if you want consensus. So the last one is all about buy-in and that neutral emotions. We'll talk a lot more about that when we go through the course itself, and when we really focus in on how do we get that buy-in, how do we ensure that there's also the accountability and that we focus on the bottom levels of our iceberg. Our iceberg here is hierarchical, so in other words, you do build on each levels, as you can see the side arrows going across. What they're saying here is once you've got your objectives, you then look at your process. Once you've got that next one, you look at your communications, then you look at your preferences, then you look at your buy-in. You've got one after each other. This is sequential, it's hierarchical, it builds on each other, they're interdependent on each other, so you can't just jump between one and go, oh, I'm going to focus on that next. It's all together. So this is something for you to consider whenever you're facilitating any workshops and any meeting. You want to consider all 5 levels, because whenever there is a problem at any of those levels, it's easy for your workshop or for your meeting to break down. The next statement we've got there is a facilitator could facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. So a facilitator could facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. Opening up that poll to you guys now. Again, do you think that this is a truth or a myth? A facilitator could facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. A facilitator could facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. Okay. We've got quite a strong answer here this time round. Very strong one way. So I'm just going to close off that poll as it comes through for the last few answers. Again, a facilitator could facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. Let's take a look at your poll results as it comes through. A facilitator could facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. You guys have said that it is 75% truth and 6% myth, and you've got about 19% on the bench. You guys have definitely got this, and 75% of you know that this is a truth. A facilitator can facilitate any type of workshop or meeting. However, we do need to consider different characteristics to an effective facilitator. These are some characteristics to what makes a good facilitator. And you do need to understand that there is what is required versus what an individual is. It's not to say a facilitator is good in all environments, not at all. But you should be able to facilitate different types of workshops and different types of meetings, but to understand your strengths as well as your weaknesses. What we look at in facilitation is that you've got your skills. So that's the left-hand side. That's the 5 bubbles that's going around. It'll look at your approach to process. So how strong are you with knowing a lot of different tools and techniques, for example? So it's all about, do you know voting with dots? Do you know rig? Do you know 4-box tools? Do you know fishbone? Do you actually have all these different processes? Are you able to come up with some of those processes itself to get to that consensus? That is that first characteristic. The second characteristic that we need to look at for an effective facilitator is your reaction to change. You've got to understand in every workshop and every meeting, as much as you can plan it, and you can plan that hour down to a T, but there's always going to be something that is unpredictable. So how are you going to be able to react to that change? How is your level of response to that? How's your reaction to change? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you work well under that? Which then leads slowly to that next one, which is your reaction to stress. So how well can you deal with the stress when it doesn't actually go your way, or when it's particularly heightened emotions in the room? How well are you dealing with that stress as well? So that's another characteristics we look at. There are sub areas under all of these as well to go into further level, but these are the major groupings. The next one's about the breadth of knowledge. Sometimes you may need a facilitation workshop where you got to know that knowledge in particular. So do you actually have a breadth of that knowledge? Have you got at least a touch on it? Have you able to, if you're doing a requirements workshop, understand at least what a requirement is? Not to understand the requirements itself, but what is a requirement and why we're trying to talk about requirements, for example. And the last one there is about the speed of reaction. So how do you actually react to that? Are you quick? Can you notice on the floor when people are disengaging? Or are you one of those who actually go nudge, nudge? Can you notice that person's now snoozing, or that person's now back on their phones, they're on their laptops, is not actually there anymore? So your reaction to your speed to reaction as well. On the right-hand side, you kind of look at these things as a spider web. I call this a spider web, not to say that everybody does. You've got two colored lines. The right-hand side, you'll see in the legend, that purple line. The purple line is kind of asking for this particular workshop and this particular meeting, what type of characteristics you require. So if we look at that, it's for starting at the 12 o'clock at the very top. It's saying for what's required, we're looking at a 6. So they need to be quite flexible. We're saying that they need to have a 6 for how they are quick to respond and act. Next one's about change orientated, again about a 6, and then down to a 5 for ideas orientated, back up to a 6 for low levels of stress, and then calm under pressure for 6, another 6 for a low profile catalyst, a 4 for extroverts, and then a 4 for broad business awareness. They want a 7 at process oriented. So in other words, they want a facilitator who really knows their processes, and then also a facilitator that really is bold, brave, and risk taker, okay? And then you can assess yourself. So you would exactly do the same thing and assess yourself as to where you believe. And you kind of look at where the two lines meet and whether you're actually good for your profile, your own individual profile in particular, whether you suit to actually help facilitate that workshop or that meeting. You could do this once yourself, and I would highly recommend you to also do it again with your peer. Get someone else to assess you on what they think you are, because what you think you are may be different to what your colleagues believe you are as well, and you want to make sure that you find that happy medium between it all. The other context that we need to look at is what is the environment of that meeting or that workshop. So for a facilitator to be able to work in that, they need to understand some of these environmental contexts. The very first one there is about the time. So do you have plenty of time? This is kind of like a little slider gauge, and you slide up and down on each of these, and you want to start looking first one at time. Do you have little time, or do you have a lot of time? So for someone who is not good under pressure, they probably shouldn't get a meeting that is little time, because you're probably going to be under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress because you have less time. So you want to kind of work with your profile in particular, and then look at what the environment of that particular meeting or workshop is as well. This slider just shows you where it is for that particular meeting. So this particular meeting we've got right now, it's saying there is little time. The next one we've got is about the certainty. What's the degree of certainty? How well known is this particular workshop? Is this a lessons learned workshop where we know very well how we're doing this and this is routine? Or is this a particular brand new, we need to talk about a vision and we've never talked about this vision and we want to gain ideas from the vision, so we don't have that much certainty. So we want to look at that as well. Level of certainty, yes, uncertainty through to very certain. And again, the slider just goes up and down. Next one's about the maturity of the group when it comes to the process. How mature is this group at facilitated workshops? In other words, how well are they at getting to a consensus and they can follow process, and that they know if this particular process isn't working, voting with dots isn't working, so please give me some monopoly money and I will use monopoly money instead. They know different processes, and they can even suggest different processes, and that's what a process aware group would be. So again, you have that sliding up the top, you'll then see it's dysfunctional. So you're trying to say that, in other words, a group that just doesn't follow process, they're kind of all sitting around a table and they can't get to that outcome, so they don't know any process on how to reach that outcome. So dysfunctional, all the way down to process aware. Then the fourth one, the size of the group does matter as well. Some facilitators work better in a large group, some facilitators work better in small groups. So we're looking at the size of these groups from small to large. Then we're going to the fifth one, what is the impact of that output? So the product that you're producing, that outcome that you're going to reach, what is the impact of that output? Is that from minimal all the way to high? So is this a roadmap for the next 5 years? Is that going to impact a lot of people down to something for 2 or 3 people? So are you looking at the impact being of high nature or minimal nature? And the last column there, what we're looking for in the last slider is the seniority of the group. Are we talking about juniors in the group, seniors in the group? And again, some sliders. It will work. Yes, different people have different personality types as well, different skills, different characteristics that is suited for particular workshops and meetings, but not to say that facilitators can't facilitate all types. This is just honing in on the personally, if you're going to pay for a facilitator as well, you want to make sure that their profile matches the environment that you are after as well. The next statement we're going to take a look at is to have a productive workshop, the facilitator must be able to make the final decision on behalf of the group. To have a productive workshop, the facilitator must be able to make the final decision on behalf of the group. And again, I'll get you guys to decide whether this is a myth or whether this is a truth. To have a productive workshop, the facilitator must be able to make the final decision on behalf of the group. Is this a myth or is this a truth? Okay. All right. Again, I can see things coming through. So I'm just going to push out that poll. So the statement again, just to take a look, it says to have a productive workshop or meeting, the facilitator must be able to make the final decision on behalf of the group. We're talking about the final decision. So to have a productive workshop, okay, the facilitator must be able to make the final decision. You guys have said, 53% of you guys have said it is a myth, and 9% of you have said it is a truth, and you guys are right on the dollar again. This is a myth. Okay, what we are saying here is a facilitator doesn't make the decisions for the group. They assist with the process on getting to that decision. They help you get to that decision. They help you make that decision, but they don't make it on your behalf. You need tools such as the ones on the left here. This is called essential and desirable. Some of you might know this better as Moscow, otherwise known as must, should, could, and won't have. So it's helping you prioritize. This is one that helps you prioritize some of your outcomes. So that way you come to an agreement of what is the most important versus the least important. And some things that I always say is that you should start everything as a won't. The reason why I say start everything as a won't and get you to justify it to a could, then again, give me another reason to justify it up to a should. And again, another reason to justify it up to a must is as humans, we often start everything as a must. We want everything. And we then say, but I don't want to choose. So all of it has to be. And so we get to the mindset that everything is a must. If we start everything as a won't and have to bump it up and justify it up, that allows us to have a better reasonings and justification as to why we really do need what we need and to really get to that outcome. The other way is if you really can't get there via those types of discussions, you can pull out another tool and technique. On the right-hand side, there is an example of voting with dots. You give everybody a number of dots, okay, 3 dots, 5 dots, however you wish, and everybody gets the same number of dots. We're not saying some senior people get more dots than others. We're going to say everybody gets the same number of dots. You have the ability to choose how to spend those dots. You could either spend all 5 dots on one particular item, 4 dots on one and then use 1 on the other. You could choose 1 on each for 5 different items. You can spend it however you wish. Okay, or you can say, I don't want to vote on any of these and not spend your 5 dots at all. Okay, sometimes we would have seen this is also done with Monopoly money. You guys get $10, $1 each, how you want to spend your money if you were to be shopping for what you are getting to an agreement to. This allows everybody to have equal say. The things that bubbles up to the top, which is the ones that get voted on the most or the one that gets spent the most dollars on, they're the ones that you know straight away are of top priority or the things that makes your decision for you. This is another example of where you might be going, where should I next go on holidays? This is a little table that helps you with a definitive answer of where you should go next on holidays. It compares only one against the other for each item. So what happens is number 1 says Pacific Island Cruise and number 2 says Disneyland. So in that first box next to it, we then compare number 1 and number 2. So for Pacific Island against Disneyland, which one's going to win? Disneyland. And then for Pacific Island against Singapore, which one are we going to win? Then we actually say, let's go on the cruise instead. If it's Pacific Island Cruise versus a ski trip, so we're comparing against those, the ski trip is better. And then Pacific Island again against fishing, It is then Pacific Islands, and then Pacific Island against the China tour, it's still Pacific Islands. So you do this against each one of them, you compare in joints, you count up the tally. So what comes up with number 1? So which ones has the most? So Disneyland had 5 in total, meaning number 1, that is the one that bubbled up as the top preference for our next holiday. So that's where we're going to go. So instead of everyone having to look at it in a different perspective, we're just comparing one over the other each time to bubble up to exactly which one comes up at first. Okay, so this is again a black and white tool. As a facilitator, there is a lot of tools and techniques you've got to be able to do this. I would say over 70 different types of tools and techniques to get to your consensus, to get to making decisions, to help you with those type of things. And that's what you need to do as a facilitator. You don't make a decision on behalf of anyone. You assist them with tools and techniques to get to a decision. You assist them on the process of how to get to a decision. The next statement there we're going to take a look at is number 5 is a facilitator is not a consultant. A facilitator is not a consultant. Again, myth or truth, a facilitator is not a consultant. Whether this is a myth or whether this is a truth, a facilitator is not a consultant. Okay, I can see them coming back through now. A facilitator is not. So again, a facilitator is not a consultant. You can see some final answers shooting through now. Let those last few come through. A facilitator is not a consultant. Let's take a look at your results. I'll push them out to you guys. You have a strong 62% of people said that this is a truth, with a 12% of you saying that this is a myth, and the others kind of on the fence on this one. This is, with the majority rules, it is a truth for this one. We are saying a little bit of what I said before. As the facilitator, you don't actually know the subject matter that well. So on the left axis, you'll see subject knowledge. This is the people who actually know knowledge really, really, really well. And we've got low to high. Consultants have a high subject knowledge. They're there to give you answers. You ask them a question, they're there to respond, and they tell you what it is. They tell you. They're giving you what it is. You're asking them, hey, how do I do this? And as a consultant, they actually say, this is how you do it. This is a template. This is what I suggest, etc., etc. They're not high in process. So for a consultant, what they focus on is the subject knowledge itself, and they're very low in the process. They don't help you get to that answer. They tell you what that answer is. So they give you the answers. So that's what they say a consultant is. As we go down towards the subject knowledge, a little bit less subject knowledge, but a little bit more process. This is what we usually have as a trainer. You would have gone to many training courses in the past, and they know a lot about the subject knowledge. Probably not as much as a consultant though, but they still know a lot about the subject knowledge. And they're a little bit more in the process space. So they allow you to be able to come up with some of those. They give you feedback, and they're able to give you those questions to try and get you to think about it. So they've got, from a trainer's perspective, a bit more subject knowledge and a bit more process. Keep proceeding through. This is when you get coaches that work with you one-on-one, coaches that work with you on one-on-one, somewhere in between with subject knowledge and somewhere in between with process. Why? Because they're helping you get to that outcome yourself. That's why they're coaching you. They're guiding you to that. And where we've got the tail end for us here talking about facilitation is that a facilitator is very good on the process. They're going to make sure to help you get to that outcome of that meeting and that workshop. They've got the ability to go, these are the tools and techniques and these are the ways to do it, but they're not high in subject knowledge. They might not even know the subject knowledge at all. Okay, so we're low in subject knowledge but very high in the process itself. That's where a facilitator is quite different to a consultant. So a facilitator is quite different to a consultant. The next statement we're going to take a look at says, you only need one facilitator per workshop or meeting. You only need one facilitator per workshop or meeting. You only need one facilitator per workshop or meeting. So every meeting you've been to, every workshop you want to reflect on it, have you only needed one facilitator for all of those? Okay. You only need one facilitator, and now I'm just going to close off this poll as they come through. You only need one facilitator per workshop or meeting. So one facilitator only. That's probably where we're drawing from our past experience as well. Have we only ever had one facilitator? Have we had more? Have we seen places where have had more? Have we only seen places that had one? We're not too sure on this one this time. We've got a little bit pushed up the answers to everybody. We've got 38% with a myth, a 28% with a truth. It was quite a close one this time with a few on the fence. This is a myth. This is a myth. What happens here is there is actually a formula to calculate how many facilitators you need, and there is a true formula based on the level of complexity, based on the level of certainty, the number of people, and the process maturity of the group. And there's a whole calculation on that. So if you were to picture a large, very large workshop where we've got 200 to 500 people, you're going to obviously need more than just your one facilitator. You're not going to be able to get that one facilitator around to everywhere. And that's still a workshop, that's still a meeting. You may just actually have it with a very large group. So you might look at the number of people, the level of complexity, the level of certainty, and the process maturity of the group. There's actually a formula for that. There's a big table. You add it all up, and it'll actually bang come out with a number. It actually is a proper formula. So happy to share those with people that are interested. That is on our facilitation course. The next one that we're looking at says, a facilitator should use a number of formats required to reach the outcome. So this is formats. So how you run so different to your process are your tools and techniques. This is the format that you're going to do it in. Are you going to do it in group? Are you going to do it as individuals? What is the format that you're doing it in? A facilitator should run using a number of different formats. Okay, so a facilitator should use a number of formats required to reach the outcome. Okay, so we're talking about formats. So do we do it in group? Do we do it as individuals? How do we actually do this? So the facilitator should use a number of, just going to close that poll and push the results out to everybody. This was a strong 47% of you said that this is a truth. This is a truth. Okay, with 6% saying a myth and some of you not too sure what formats are. I will go through what formats are now. Formats being top left corner there on the left. Top left corner there shows a format of all to one. So or one to all, sorry. So in other words, this is where you get a person standing up at the front of the room and it's one person presenting to everybody else. Okay, that is a one to all format. So you might have an expert in the room, you might have the consultant in the room. So that particular format is where you've got one person up the front that is presenting to the rest of the room. You might choose to do it in another format of all, which is the ones in the middle there, in the 4 people there. Everybody's got equal say. Everybody's got a say. Everyone's an individual that's classified, and everyone's ideas, thoughts, inputs, all that is counted, and that is classified a format of all. And the right-hand side there is a format of everybody to one. So in other words, everybody to a whiteboard, and everybody to a flip chart, everybody to a projector. So it's everybody to one, so all to one. And the last one there is group. So what we've done here is 3 different groups. We've grouped everybody into separate segments, okay? So then they've got, as a good facilitator, and it's good for people to know that there are different formats to use at different occasions. And what we're saying here in a format of all, this is good when you want to minimize those dominant people. The people that you're saying is always the ones talking, and the people who's too quiet never get a say. That's probably when you should use a format of all, because that's an equal say. Everybody gets even say, and everybody gets to provide their input. The next one there is a format of group, where you might have a large workshop, a large meeting, and it actually cuts down in time. For sure, to actually say you're going to do it in different groups, and then you come back as a group. The only problem with the format of group is that it has to be followed by another format. If you're going to do things in group, you actually have to then present either each group back to all, okay? So either something to do with the group, you've got to follow another format. All to one, so this is everybody to one. So this is all of you guys might be sticking picking up post-it notes to a whiteboard, or you might be actually all to a flip chart, or you all might be going towards something that's all to one. You're all still everybody getting individual say. The last one is one to all, one person in front of the room, one person that's speaking, one person that's a subject matter expert, for example, and they're presenting to everybody else. So these are the 4 different formats on top of the tools and techniques that you need. So this is understanding that there are process, which is the tools, the techniques, as well as the format. Processes are made up of your tools and techniques plus your format. So a facilitator needs to consider for this particular workshop or meeting, are we doing it in these particular formats, in these particular tools and techniques? Okay. Then the last one we've got there, number 8 says, you can be an independent certified facilitator. You can be an independent certified facilitator. So can you be an independent certified facilitator? So right now, can you come and become certified in facilitation? You can be an independent certified facilitator. Okay, this was amazing results, this one. We have had 0% people saying that this is a myth. I'll just push the results up here once it is consolidated. You can be an independent certified facilitator. We have had 0% saying it is a myth, and then we've got a 65%, strong 65% people saying that this is the truth. This is a truth. This is the truth. You can be internationally recognized. This is an international certification. This physical book is an actual certification textbook theory, how to be a facilitator. It is provided by the APMG International as an exam institute. They do have 2 levels, foundation level and practitioner level. The tools and techniques, my book's tabbed up quite a lot. But if you can see, half my book from this back part forward, half my book, or this half, is just tools and techniques. It's explaining all the different tools and techniques you would ever use to facilitate a workshop or to facilitate a meeting to make sure that you get to that right outcome. This is one of those in particular certifications that gives you a lot to take away. Irrespective of what type of role you do, as long as you run meetings or you run workshops, you want to know what tools and techniques are going to help you get to that. The front half explains the process aspects, explains those characteristics, what makes a great facilitator, but the back is the handy tool, the book that you're always going to have to reference to say, hey, in this particular workshop, I can't get to this outcome. What should I do? Clip, 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 get some ideas, and then there are other tools and techniques. A good, solid book this one is when it comes to a certification. If you did want to find out more about our certification, so especially the facilitation one, you go onto our website and go to www.ddls.com.au and go under courses. You'll see an area for process and then an area for project management. And under project management, you'll be able to get all to our facilitation ones. And it is inclusive of exams. In other words, as part of your 3 days on your 2 days, so your full week with us here at DDLS, you can get certified with us during that week. You will sit for your exams during that week across all of our different branches across Australia. Okay. This is, as I was saying at the beginning, this was one of our 4 seminars, webinars that we are doing at this, for every month to do some myth busting. The next one is available for you guys now already on our internet for you to register for our next webinar, which is on the role of the change manager. We will be myth busting again on the role of the change manager. If you have attended the first one and you're already attending the second one, you are aware that if you attend all 4, you will get to use the code MythBust and get a $300 voucher from us. So don't forget to register for your next one so that you can get your voucher. That was pretty much what we had for myth busting on that role. Any questions, Beck?
Thank you so much for that, Louisa. So we've got a few questions come through, but guys, if you do actually have any questions, don't be shy. Pop them into the question and answer panels as well as the chat panel. That's where Manuela and I will be going through those questions. But Louisa, so the first question, would you say that a facilitator is an actual job role or is it a full-time role?
you're not going to often find a www.seek.com. You're not going to be able to find a job that says facilitator as easily as you're going to find one that is a project manager, business analyst, etc., etc. You're more likely to need these facilitation skills as part of your day-to-day job. There are people who do this for a living. In other words, they go around organization to organization to just help them facilitate their large meetings or to their meetings that they can't get an outcome. But it is quite rare to do it as a full-time job. If you find yourself doing that, then brilliant, but I would probably say it's part of your everyday skills to anyone that runs meetings and workshops.
Okay, fantastic. And so in your experience, what roles are suited to being a facilitator?
In particular, this is based on my past experience in my past life being project managers, program managers, all those. I would highly say anyone that is working in Agile world especially. So if you're doing Agile, Scrum, Lean, any of those, you would know that you do a lot more workshops. You facilitate a lot more workshops. So if you're playing that team leader role that has to facilitate, then you definitely want to wear that facilitator's hat. And roles where it's your business analyst, you run lots of workshops as well, that's where you want to wear that facilitator's hat. Same for project managers. You run a lot of meetings, you want to make sure you're getting an outcome, so again, that facilitator's hat. And I think what it's important for people to know is you might want to gain these skills and facilitate for your peers' workshops. So for your colleagues, you might do it for their workshop and in return they do it for yours. That way you can participate and not have to wear that hat as a facilitator when you need to participate, and then you can swap over with them when you need to facilitate and they can participate.
Thanks for that, Louisa. I think you just touched on our next question. So Sam has actually asked, if you have a vested interest in an outcome, are you still able to be the facilitator? For example, if you have a conflict of interest maybe?
Best not to. You want to stay independent when you are a facilitator. So if you want to participate and really hone in and get people to hear what you're trying to say and not be biased, because if you're facilitating, you've already got a certain answer or certain outcome that you want to meet, people will go, you're just biased and trying to push us that way. You want someone to be facilitating, neutral hat, and you then want to put on that participative hat where you want to participate and you want people to come on board and get buy into what your outcome that you want to achieve.
Great, thank you for that, Louisa. So next question from Chantel. Can you explain the example technique involving the cruise, Disneyland, etc.? What was the technique called?
Yeah, so that grid, the actual big grid one, again.
Yes, correct,
yeah. Yeah, so definitely. So in the book, okay, so in the book, if you were to ever get there, you actually have all these tools and techniques for you to help you make sure. So I'll see if I can show you that one in particular. And it is, flip to my pages, because they want you to be able to make sure you can get to that outcome. You've got 4 bones, you've got the grids, you've got your, I'm getting there.
So you're trying to look for the page there, Louisa?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that everyone can see how they, and then
yep,
that one there for you. Brilliant. Okay, and again, it's just to make sure that you've got your rig done. So again, that was rig. It's just a grid. It's a relative importance grid. It's just for you to compare each item against each one. You column it, tally it, and then you can also do an extra conversation around it as to why that one versus that one. Sometimes the hardest one with rig in particular is that people might go, but I kind of want both. So if you're comparing 1 against 2, they can't actually get to an answer. That's probably when you actually have to make them go for another tool and technique on top.
Great, thank you for that, Chantel. I hope that answers your question. We've got another question from Jacqueline. So do you find facilitation used significantly in Australia?
In Australia particularly, I would say companies are very mature and know how to get to an outcome, definitely, but there are definitely a lot more companies that are not mature in process, so they do struggle a lot with actually constructive meetings and constructive workshops, and this is definitely something that it should be growing, and there's definitely more and more uptake on it because of the fact that there have been so many organizations that spend a lot of people's time, and time is money because it's your resources that's burning away, where they can't get to a certain outcome because their meetings are wasted upon that. So Are we greater than that in Australia? Probably not, but we are slowly getting there. We are improving, and the numbers are showing by more and more people taking on things like facilitation.